All right. Hello and welcome to all of you. And my apologies to those of you in the States with this now being the Jovian Evening Lectures European version. Couldn't keep the same time frame. We would have been teaching at 4 o'clock in the morning. So to those of you who are downloading, I'm glad that you're participating anyway, and nice that you're here. All right, let's get into the subject of today's lecture. Excuse me, one of those areas that, it's been an underlying theme for us since 1781. This Pluto interregnum that we are all participating in. I'm somebody who is very much interested in and has investigated rather deeply the evolutionary process. And the evolutionary process as it's seen through mechanics. It's clear to me that the advent of the nine-centered being is, in 1781, was not something that came fully dressed. That is, the full potential of the nine-centered being was not available a couple of hundred years ago. And it was clear that this Pluto interregnum between 1781 and 2027 was really almost like a gestation for the nine-centered being. When I look at my encounter and the revelation of human design, one of those unasked questions is, why wasn't that there in 1781? Because so much of what's possible wasn't possible then that is possible now. And most of that has to do with what's going on in the solar plexus center. I mean, basically, this Pluto interregnum is changing something that is really fundamental, something that you don't see colored in here. Let me just change that color. This movement here is the human experiential way. And it's been a subject of a number of things that I've talked about relative to the transformation that we are going through. The human experiential way has been impacted by the transiting of Pluto as Pluto moves through the wheel. And remember that Pluto was in the 41st gate in 1781, the initiating codon, and it's again going to be in the 41st gate in 2027. So we're really living in this Pluto interregnum. One of the ways in which we are so deeply impacted on this plane by the emotional field is that the human experiential way travels through the emotional plane. That is, it is a stream that operates through and has the solar plexus center as its core. And everything about the human experiential way, that is this movement from, the initiating codon in its fantasy, that fantasy that becomes a desire, that desire that, becomes a very, very powerful urge that ultimately can be fulfilled through manifesting. That it is along this human experiential way that everything about the nature of life has been determined, that is, life as far as we understand. And it's been determined, rooted in the emotionality of the solar plexus system. And when I say its emotionality, what I'm really referring to is its wave context. I mean, this is the thing that makes the emotional motor so powerful, is its wave motion. That wave motion, by the way, is something that originates in the 6th gate. That is, the various waves that are there, the crash wave of the abstract process, the planing wave of the individual process, the ratcheting wave of the tribal process are all rooted in the 6th gate. That's where they come from. And what we're dealing with is that the solar plexus system is made up of various components, the gates as we refer to them, but each of these gates have a different relationship to the layers that are there in the solar plex. We have a surface layer of the solar plex that is really just about the motor. In other words, it's the basic motor function, one of our 4 motors that are here in human design, that the wave is the motor function itself. Nothing more, nothing less. This is the motor. And of course, it's the motor that's so distorting, and because human beings give reasons to chemistry, That motor that operates in a wave leads to the way in which human beings are going to project on, the way in which they look at the world depending on where they are in their particular wave. Give a reason to it, get attached to it, and then go the way that most emotional beings go. They go the path of suffering. The suffering that even when they're going up, they realize based on experience that they will have to go down, and slowly but surely even the going up loses its magic. The motor becomes something that is so potentially deeply distorting in the life. And of course what we know in human design is that there's no truth in the now. That is, no truth in the now for the emotional being. So the motor function is very powerful. It takes away the existential potential for truth. There are many things that it gets in the way of. There's something else that's going on though. Beneath the level of the motor function, there is something really profound that's at work within the solar plex. What modern science now has been discovering for the last 10 years, that is the density of neural activity that is in our solar plex. A level of neural activity that, by the way, far exceeds the neural activity that we find in a brain system. And most of that is something that is just simply not understood. That is, not understood allopathically, why that's there. They're just in awe that they're finding all of this beneath the surface. And what we know is there is that the solar plex center, like its symmetrical components, the solar plex center is here to be one of the awareness centers. In fact, to complete the process. We get to see this at the substructure level in human design. That when we get down to the tonal level, and tone represents our cognitive architecture, the tone is rooted in these three cognitive binaries. And these three cognitive binaries, the splenic system, our original awareness system, the ajna center in its relationship with the head center, what we call the mental plane and mental awareness or its potential, and here the potential for solar plex awareness. And solar plex awareness is basically what is understood in variable work as right awareness. In other words, it's very different. It's very different from the way in which cognition operates from the mental plane, and again, even more different in that sense than the way in which cognition operates at the splenic level. It's one of the things that you understand if you're a splenic person. You realize that the awareness that your spleen comes to in the moment is not translatable to the mind. It isn't. In the sense that the mind is not in any way capable of understanding why, other than through theoretical, postulations, cannot understand why the spleen is saying yes or no to anything. It is an awareness that operates within its own specific parameters. Same thing is true for the mind. And the same thing is going to be true here, because what we're dealing with when we're dealing with solar plex awareness is that we're not dealing with the mental way in which we have achieved cognition. The mind is a measuring machine, and the way in which that measurement is something that we can self-reflectively look at. That coming out of the solar plex system is an awareness that is, how shall I put this, much more sensitive. It is an awareness that is rooted in being able to cognitively interpret the environment in a very different way. Interpret the auric field, interpret the electromagnetic field, be able to interpret things through the tactile. There are all kinds of levels in which information is going to be garnered from solar plex awareness that is not going to be understood. That is, in the spontaneous sense, the mind will have no more access to what the emotional awareness is picking up than it does to what the spleen is. It will not. As a matter of fact, if we're living in a world that is homogenized and everybody is stuck up here and living their life through their minds and directing their lives through their minds, there isn't going to be any access to that at all. Any more than, it's the old joke about the not self who's splenic. You visit them in the hospital and the first thing they say is, "Oh, I just knew it." So we're going to be living with a real change in the way in which information is being taken in. And again, those beings who are going to be so sensitive at this level, if they're not prepared for this, if they don't understand the way in which this works, that it's going to present as many problems as it's going to present possible benefits, to those that are going to be so endowed. Let's think about what we're looking at here. The first thing is you can see the two gates that have the green. The 49th gate of revolution and the 55th gate of abundance. Now these two gates share something in common. They're both the histidine codon. And the histidine codon is literally the key to the chemical source of the mutation at the genetic level, the mutation that's taking place in the solar plex system. It is all operating out of this. And what's interesting about that is that it's operating that and it's being pressured by two forces. That is, the pressure that is always there from the 39th gate and the pressure of the 19. Now, the 19 and 49, as you can see, are something that are very unique, and I will talk about that in a moment. But let's just begin with the pressure of the 39. I mean, it's an interesting thing about the channel 3955. When we look at it in the ordinary sense on the surface, we see that it's a channel of moodiness. It has a great deal to do with romance. It is a stream of passion, after all. And the 55th gate is a gate of spirit. And the 55th gate is best described as the cup half full or the cup half empty. And this gate is always under pressure, and it's always under pressure by the 39th gate. Now, the 39th gate is there to provoke the spirit, to bring the spirit out. And if there's anything that has truly initiated the transformation that is taking place in the solar plex system, it is the constant tension that is produced by the 39th gate, the constant tension that is stirring what is the genetic mutation that is taking place in the 55. What we're looking at in terms of these two gates is that these are going to be the first two gates in the solar plex system that will not have a wave function. Now that isn't going to apply to anybody, who is already alive in that sense. And what I mean by that is that in 2027, those children that are going to come into the world, those children who are going to be born, and not children that are going to be raised, but children like us that are going to be nine-centered humans, that in these children, these two gates are going to operate differently than they did in their parents or they did with us. They're not going to be the same. As a matter of fact, what's interesting about the 55 to begin with, it's the 55 that is the controller of the planing wave of the individual. Now think about the individual wave. The individual wave doesn't look like this one over here. It really doesn't. The individual wave looks like this. And every once in a while it spikes. And it can spike up or it can spike down. And then eventually it will go back to a plane. Now there are times, and of course again this has to do with how deep the not self in a being can be and how distorted they can be. Because of course all of this can be, ramped up by the distortions of a not self mind. That there are possibilities to peak and to plane. Or to plane below. So, those people that get on a high and can't get off of it and lose literally control. And those that spike downward and get into the deep, deep melancholies that are possible, that are quite notable as a matter of fact. Deep melancholies and not be able to get out of them. So, the emotional wave is something that its very nature is its flatness. I mean, that's its nature. When you think about emotional people, if you meet a 3955, you realize right away that they always seem to be in the same basic mood. You know, they go through long, long phases in the same mood. And if you know them long enough, you'll see the spikes. You know, one way or another, the spikes are going to be there. But basically, they are planing creatures. So what's going to happen here in the 55 is that what you're going to get is it's going to flatten out. And that's what it's doing now. Now, when I say that this isn't going to impact us, it isn't going to impact us in the sense of the way it's going to be natural in somebody who is born with this. We are all feeling it through conditioning. We are always going to participate with it in conditioning. Regardless of whether you're defined emotionally or not, you know, we are experiencing the transformation that is taking place here. Now, one of the interesting things to think about in terms of the 55 going flat is to think about, first of all, what it represents. I mean, you know, you're walking along, you're in your flat space, you know, and that's the moment that you see somebody, and in that moment you spike, you know, and you spike up. You know, this spiking up, this moment of passion, of interest, it could be love, you know, all of those things, because remember, this is where passion flows. Now, the moment you go flat, the passion's gone. It's gone. Now, it isn't going to disappear overnight. But boy, is it ever going away. It's flattening out. See, the moment that you take the solar plex wave away, the moment you take the motor action away from the 55 and you flatten it out, there are so many different things that are going to be impacted by that. You know, one of the dilemmas of the 3955 are dilemmas with food. Bulimia, anorexia, you know, all kinds of spirit-related emotional problems with food. It's going to flatten out. You know, we're going to see slowly a decrease in this, you know, this problem. You're slowly going to see this moving further and further into the background. Again, it has to do with this flattening out. Now, what's underneath that is something entirely different, because after all, when it comes to 2027, you know, that we have basically 4 gates that make up the cross of the sleeping phoenix. You know, this is the next global cycle that we're entering into, you know, in 2027. There with the 2034, the pure manifesting generator activating the 59, and the 59 is the opposition in the wheel to the 55. What happens on one side is always mirrored on the other. Always. So whatever is going on to flatten out the 55 is changing the way in which the 59 is going to work. If you go back to, you know, many of my earliest teachings in regards to, you know, 2027 and what's coming beyond that, that one of the things is a change in our whole reproductive methodology. First of all, the reproduction slowly but surely is something that's going to be more difficult. We're already, I mean, when I started to talk about that in the early 90s, you know, I've watched over all of these years now this incredible you know, rise in the vast fertility industry that exists in advanced countries. And all the various tools have been developed in order to try to maintain stable fertility in human beings. Yet at the same time, I witnessed the same, you know, the phenomena, you know, that you get to see in so many countries, you know, how difficult it is becoming in that sense. We are headed towards a population crash, one that certainly is going to, you know, be very, very powerful in the sense that we already have major reductions that are a byproduct of the social dynamics that we live in. Most of the tribes of Europe do not produce enough children to maintain their societies. You know, at the rate right now in Spain of childbirth, that, you know, by in another 80 or 90 years, that Spaniards are going to be a minority on their own peninsula because they simply do not produce enough children. All of the tribes are producing under two, two being the replacement necessary for the two adults, and so many places it's 1.2 or 1.5 or 1.6. So you have this diminishment that is taking place. What's happening here, though, this underlying thematic that is here in the 55-59, this is something that is really beginning to gain strength. Now, the change is actually only going to take place when we get beyond 2027, when this becomes the keynotes to the background frequency, when this is the way in which the whole plane is being impacted. But it's something to understand about the nature of intimacy, is that intimacy is going to lose its passion. Intimacy is going to lose its passion. And if you think about that in reproductive terms, we've already seen that, in vitro births and surrogate mothers and, all these kinds of things that are beginning to, appear in and around the whole fertility issue, that this is an underlying theme that is here. So we're going to have an impact, this flattening out of the 55. Now it says something else. Everything about the 55th gate is that the moment that you take away the motor function is you suddenly have an awareness gate. An awareness gate. And this is something very, very special. It has nothing to do with how we understand the solar plex system. It has been dominated for us forever by the motor function. We have not had access to what is the pure potential of awareness that is there in the solar plex itself. And this 55th gate speaks really to the unique spirit, the expression of the unique spirit. It is an individual gate. And it is not about emotional spirit anymore. It's not about that spirit that is seen in the half cup, full or empty. That emotional spirit that's always rising and falling and suffering. It's not about the emotional spirit. It isn't. Not about the wave spirit. It's about the spirit. The essence of what it is to be unique. It's here. It's the completion of the story. Until we have awareness in these three areas, we do not reach our cognitive potential. This is what we're all about. Is get to that place of being able to fulfill what is our cognitive potential. And you see, this gate of spirit, once it is stripped of the motor wave, this becomes a unique force of spirit awareness. This unique awareness that measures differently. Everything's about measurement. We live in a duality. So everything's a this and that. So everything's a measurement. The spleen measures in certain ways. We can simplify it by saying, healthy or not healthy. I recognize it, I don't recognize it. The immune system doing its work. Here in the Ajna Center, we have a very different way of doing that. The concretized way that we have through our whole mental apparatus that, has evolved over all of these thousands of years. This is really new. This is really new. A different way of being cognitive. And you see, because it's part of the solar plex system, and because the wave is going to remain, the motor function is going to remain, that this is an awareness that travels differently. It does. Here you smell and you taste. Here you see. But here, Here it's something else. Through the wave, through carrying along on the wave, this is an awareness that penetrates at a different level. It penetrates into the substances, the energy fields that are there, that we do not have tools for here. See, and then we're finally going to have the real fulfillment of nine-centered potential. See, we're very limited. I mean, limitation is really an amazing thing. You know, your eyes can only see what they see, right? You don't see neutrinos, you don't see gamma rays, you don't see all kinds of things, because you're not designed to see them. You're not. And of course, not being designed to see them means that you don't have any way of assessing them other than theoretically. See, we have a whole new set of information that's being made available to us as a cognitive creature. It's a whole new set of information. Very profound in its own way. More complex than either of its predecessors. Subtler than they are. More sensitive than they are. And with the power to be deeply transoric, in that they ride on the wave. That they take in so much, and they take it in the right sense. You know, when we're looking at tonal architecture, there's a great divide that runs through the center. You know, everything over here is left and everything over here is right. And what it represents is a receptivity that is really profound. This is receptive awareness. It is receptive awareness that is there to take in and to take in deeply, but to take in beyond the limitation of the mind. To take in what the mind cannot take in. In the same way that the spleen takes in what the mind cannot take in. But you know, this is our evolutionary progression. It goes like this. And we're about to experience, in that sense, the final stage of this maturation, of this evolutionary mechanism. Now here's a real story. The 49th gate is the gate of revolution. I like to call it Abraham's gate, because it's the gate of the butcher. It's the gate of the sacrificed, the sacrificer. It is the gate of principles. It's the gate of the fear of God. You know, it is the gate that is the doorway to acceptance into the tribe. The 49th gate carries an enormous influence in our lives. It carries an enormous influence in our lives because we have been dominated now for 400 years by the global cycle of the cross of planning and the channel 4037 at its core. And that channel 4037, this channel of community, of course the rest of that, this tribal stream begins in the 19, that pressure of need, and flows from the 49 through to the 3740, this tribal stream. And because we're living in this era, this has great power. It is also the controller of our resources, as we found out when Neptune, in its transit of the 49, brought such disarray to the world financial system, still is having its impact on the world financial system. It's the gate of resources. And more than that, it is the gate of the deepest fundamentalism. Because that is what we're really getting to see. See, everything about the tribe is that the tribe has basic fundamental needs that are rooted in the 19th gate. This pressure. And the pressure in the 19th gate is a need for the basic things of the tribe. That is, the need for basic resources, food, shelter, education. The need for a marriage bond. That is, the need for pair bonding. And the need for pair bonding to be accepted within a tribal construct. the need for God and religion as a glue to hold the tribe together with an ideology. All of that is in the 19th gate. All of it as a pressure. The principles realized in that sense through the 49 in its way. And this is a ratchet wave. This is very different. A ratchet wave is that you say something to somebody and they take it in and they don't like it, but nothing happens. And then the next day, it begins to rise up. It begins to ratchet back and forth, but each time as it's ratcheting, it gets higher and higher and higher and higher until one day you walk up to that person and you say something really innocuous and they explode. This is the ratchet. You know, this so-called slow to anger, this building up until there's finally the emotional release. Now this ratchet wave is being impacted. This 49th gate, like the 55th gate, these are the only two histidine codons. They are together in this transformation that is taking place. But one of the things that is happening here is very different than what's happening between the 55 and the 39. See, the 39, this is a Cancerian gate. It is carrying the past in it. It is the root of individualism. If you look at the left angle cross of individualism, it is framed on the 38-39. You know, the 38 looks into the future, the 39 holds on to the past. There is this whole continuity of history in the transformation of our being that is acting out as a pressure here to bring about this change in spirit, to kill the wave, you know, to bring about the true spirit, the true unique spirit of the being. It's only here that the true spirit of the being is finally released and revealed in that sense. But very different here in this relationship. Because in the relationship between the 19 and the 49, it is the 49 that carries the wave function. It is, after all, the emotional gate. It is the ratcheting gate. But the thing to be clear about, what we, get to see in the 55, is that what's happening is that this wave is being taken away. It's being taken away. The 49 is no longer going to be, post-2027, those born with it, no longer connected to the motor function. And the result of that is that this pressure out of the 19, this pressure and this lack of wave leads to a break here. Now, when I say a break, think of it this way. You know, that you've got 2 points at either end of the channel, and they're firing. You know, like neurons firing in the brain. You know, they're firing. And they're firing at each other, and there is a way for them in firing to each other to reach each other. But it's rooted in the firing. The 49 is going to stop firing. It's just not going to be there. Period. Over. So in essence, those children born post-2027, like you and me, non-centered humans, that there is going to be a breakdown in the communication between the 19th and the 49th gate. And that changes everything. It changes the 3740. It changes it all. And it takes away all the driving forces that are there in the 19. No longer will the 19 be able to apply that pressure on the 49th gate. That the principles of the 49th gate are not going to be conditioned by pressure or by wave function, but the principles are going to be conditioned by awareness. Awareness. It's going to be an awareness gate. It's not going to be a motor gate. And it's not going to be determined by the needs of the tribe at all. It is simply going to be concerned with being able to filter the experiential world and to be able to recognize correct principles through awareness that penetrates at a level that's totally different from the ajna and the spleen. Now, obviously, in a lecture like this, I can't go into all of the details of, the way in which right awareness operates. But it is something to understand that this is a cognitive potential that is only now really beginning to be grasped. Only now are those beings who have the opportunity through human design to find out about, their leftness, their rightness, to be able to accept and to finally be at ease with the way in which their cognitive process works. See, we've been missing something. We've been waiting for it. This is what the seven-centered being relied on. This is why it's so easy for us to fall into old seven-centered strategic patterns. But this interregnum is about the balance that has to come, so that we can have our unique spirit expressed as awareness, that we can have unique principles expressed through this awareness. And you see, an awareness that taps into resources that are totally different from the mental and splenic resources. Another layer that has been invisible to us, that has never been available to us, is going to be available. Now, it's going to have an impact at many levels. This connection here, it operates in many ways. This is one of the mammalian connections. Human beings have 3 different ways in which they can connect to mammals. Mammals do not have a solar plex system. Human beings can have the 49, mammals can have the 19. This is a cross-special connection. In the same way that humans can have the 22, and if a mammal has the 12, it's a cross-special connection. Same thing is true for the 62. Humans can have the 17, mammals do not have a neocortex. Humans can have the 17, mammals the 62, cross-special connection. We have 3 of these connections with the mammalian world, but this one is very significant because this is where we domesticate animals. It is our basic bargain with the animals that we control for slaughter. And this is going to break down. That relationship is no longer going to work. We're going to have much more difficulty in, being able to control mammal populations in order to, cull them and use them for our food chain. And of course that is, that's going to operate at many levels, not just at the physical level, but at the psychological level. It's like seeing the rise of, vegetarianism in the advanced world. And, all of this is a byproduct of the pressures that have been here in this channel that have been going on for hundreds of years now. And it's about to burst in that sense. So this theme of domestication of animals, one of the things that I postulate, because I honestly don't know, we domesticate animals in many ways. And I think that we're going to have a lot more resistance from, even our household pets. Our pets generally are on this line here. That is, this is the social channel of individuality. It's a way to make friends with strangers. And of course, this is a place where, mammals and humans originally met. This social bond that came across. But these mammals that have been, basically, bred for slaughter, there is going to be a real problem that arises in that. The problem itself may not necessarily manifest by an animal farm scenario, because I doubt that very much, but it certainly may result in diseases impacting our controlled herds, and ultimately those diseases being devastating to our food chain, in the sense that we will no longer be able to take advantage of it. It's certainly one of the things that is going to be there. I think the most frightening thing that arises out of this breakdown that is taking place in the 1949 is what is happening to us at the religious level. I mean, it's so interesting. The 49th gate is, in its classic form, without all of this, mutation. The 49th gate is basically the gate of religion. And the 55th gate is basically the gate of individual spirit. Two different things. And one of the things that's clear about the awakening of awareness is that it is intended to transform the way in which, our spiritual mechanism operates. The moment that the 49th gate loses its motor function and begins to be an awareness, it's the moment that it's no longer organizing in the religious sense. In other words, there's going to be a breakdown in the power of religion. Remember that the 49th gate is this fear of God. That fear of God is a motor function. I mean, it's a motor function. And it's going to disappear. The 49th gate is not going to be involved in that. The 49th gate is not going to act as, the control mechanism to organize the community according to a religious credo. Look around in our world. From the moment that we came into the nine-centered form, religion and God have been under attack. I mean, they have. And not in the most obvious sense. It's the secular world. And basically they've been under attack by science more than anything else. That is, so many attributes and so many areas of, religious dogma have had to bend in many ways to, what secular science has brought. Where people used to, at the beginning of this global cycle that we're in, of planning, where people had to pray that they would survive something. Now we have doctors that send us a bill. There is, science is its own godhead. There are all these beings that, basically worship science, who live by it, who see, somebody dressed in white in an institution and immediately think that they're second to God. I mean, there's been all of this crumbling. If you look at, Western society as a whole, which has been intellectually mature throughout this cross-planning cycle, you will see that secularism has basically diminished in so many ways the power of religion and the power of God to determine our lives. And yet, as we've moved closer and closer to 2027, what we've been able to witness, and it really began in 1960. It began when we entered into the first line theme of the cross of planning. That is the inner truth theme of the cross of planning. What I call the return to Eden. It was in that moment that, the stage was set for the rise of fundamentalism as a backlash to all of this collapsing, to the collapse of the moral codes and, all of those various things. And of course, what you get to see is that there is an enormous backlash against the secular world that's at work in so many human beings on the planet. I mean, it is a deeply homogenized movement. And at the extreme of that movement, we have all of these fundamentalist forces. And I'm not just referring to Islam, by the way, I'm not. I'm referring to all of them. Christian fundamentalists, Jewish fundamentalists, Hindu fundamentalists, Buddhist fundamentalists. They're everywhere that you look. They're all basically trying to, get back to the 15th century or something. They're trying to get away from all of that, and they're trying to enforce that in incredibly violent ways as a backlash against the basic power that they have had disappearing. This need is not going to be fulfilled. It is one of the most profound things that is happening to us as a byproduct of the breakdown of the communication between these two gates in this channel. It also means that the institutions that are rooted in the 19th gate, the institutions that, provide for us the tribal institutions that are the institution of marriage, the institutions of education and health and all of these things. They're all under threat. I mean, all of them. Remember, when we get to 2027, there is not going to be a 4037 in the background frequency at all. It's not going to be there. It's not. We're not going to have this background support that we are all in this bargain together. You see it all the time on Facebook, the we are one, the oneness of everything. We're all one. Yeah, we're all one. You wait and see what happens when we get to 2027. You'll discover that we're not one. This was the background frequency. We get to 2027. 2027 says, hey, excuse me, you're on your own. That's what the sleeping phoenix is. 3 gates individual and a 59th gate that hardly is going to carry much tribal quality. There's this incredible movement. Day by day, this system, this 1949 system is slowly deteriorating. It just is. So interesting that it's the channel of synthesis. When we entered into the first line theme in 1960, we basically entered into, the window of opportunity between then and 2027 to get to the inner truth, one of the keys in the lock and key system of this cycle. Because the synthesis is going to break down. The way in which our societies are interwoven at all of these various levels, that slowly is going to come to an end. See, the not-self world is going to have difficulties with all of this. At the solar plex level, a whole incredible thing is opening up. It just is. We are going to have full access to awareness. To a cognitive potential that is not dominated by the mental plane. But a cognitive awareness that goes deeper than that. It's one of the things you notice when you learn about your design. You begin to notice when you're taking in the other. You begin to notice the impact. You become aware of it. In that you're enriched. There is so much wisdom to be gained in that. We are all going to experience the transformation of the solar plex. Both at the mundane level, that is, what's going to happen when the 55 planes, and the 55 is going to have the first impact in that. Oh, think about it. I mean, in so many ways, it's very odd. The 39, 55, 22, 12, this stream, emoting, everything about it, is so deeply tied to its motor, so deeply tied to this passion, to this building of the fires, to this, and all of this passion leading to what we have come to understand as romantic expression, romantic art. See, what fascinates me is there's a new art form that's going to come into the world. I don't mean to sound so mystical, but it's true. I mean, there's an art form that's going to come into the world that is strictly related to this particular awareness. Each awareness, in that sense, brings its own artistic potential. And here we're going to have something else. This awareness spirit. This spirit awareness. And this spirit awareness operating through the potential of what the right brings, which is this deep, 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 deep receptivity. In the end, though, it will all come down to what in the end this life is really about. Who's there? The solar plex awareness is awareness that is waiting for something. It's waiting for the other. It's waiting for the right other. Everything about being right is about recognizing that the level of the other is the level that you get to express in this life. How important it becomes for all of us to remember and to remind others what strategy and authority really brings to you in this life. Something very different. Something also very interesting. After 2027, a child is born and they have the emotional system and they have the 55th gate and the 49th gate. They don't have any of the other gates. Or they just have one of those two. And that solar plex is going to be defined, let's say the 55, and it's defined downward. There will be no wave. These will not be beings that will have to, be limited by no truth in the now. They will be very different. They will be aware in a very, very different way. Again, understand there's this enormous neural density that is here. There's this incredible capacity to take in information from the other in a very, very different way. Very different way. See, my real concern in terms of solar plex evolution is the education necessary to go along with it. At the deeper levels of the knowledge in human design, we work with what it means to carry rightness in your life, what it means to be right-minded or right-brained, or to have a right environment or a right perspective, and to recognize what a gift that can be, to be relaxed with it, to learn to accept it for what it is and not to put left-oriented labels on what rightness is. Because rightness is not a problem. It is depth itself. It is the great receptivity. And you see, what it's waiting for is that it's waiting for the solar plex. Right now, there's only one awareness aspect that is connected to rightness, where rightness can actually be experienced. And it's at the mental plane. Because the mental plane is really divided into two. That is, it's divided into its traditional strategic leftness, and on the other side, its receptive rightness. And it's here that in the first stage of the development of rightness, because the mutation actually took place here in the Ajna Center, that it is this first stage in the rightness that's connected to the mental, so we can talk about it. I can talk to those beings that carry rightness and explain it to them, because there is a right aspect to our thinking that allows this to be grasped. But in order for the deepest levels of rightness to be expressed, we're waiting for this. We're waiting for the tools. And oh boy, are we getting close. Around 17 years from now, very close. And most of us, hopefully, get to see that. I hope I'm around to see that. Just to see the turning of the wheel. It's not like I expect everything to happen in a moment. To get beyond that point, to be able to see the beginnings of these beings coming into the world, to be able to see clearly, as a deeply unemotional being, it is so obvious to me that I can feel it. I do. I can feel it. My youngest son is a 3955, and I can feel the shifting that takes place in this energy almost on a day-to-day basis. That I can't put my finger on the frequency and hold it because it's changing. And I've noticed this in other 3955s. And I'm a 49 myself. And I've been dealing with my emotional system being conditioned and my 49 being my soul theme, and therefore getting very deep into its nature. And the last years, particularly since around 2002, I began to notice how the way in which my 49 operates in amplification was changing, was just changing. And as a knower, it's not always easy to explain what that was. Just a difference in its intensity, a difference in its quality, a difference in the way it felt for me. And of course, I'm not somebody that's here to actually experience it as a core element, but I'm very susceptible to its frequency. If you pay attention, you can actually feel the change coming. You can see it in the world around you. And we're finally getting to a place where the nine-centered being can really flourish. And for the first time, with the awakening of the 49 and the 55 to being awareness gates, for the first time we're really going to have full nine-centered potential. I mean, we're really going to be there. I mean, after all, in evolutionary times, the couple of 100 years or so since 1781 doesn't mean a hell of a lot. This is, in evolutionary terms, this is nothing. So, this whole interregnum that we've been going through has really been this developmental interregnum to get us to this place and prepare us for it, this long evolutionary movement to get there. It's why design came when it came. I mean, to be able to lay the foundation for what is beyond this, because this is when all the tools that we have and all the ways we have of understanding in human design, from variable down to tones and base orientations, all of these things that are part of the knowledge now can be fully applied and can be taken full advantage of. And that we will get to see and we'll get to experience in those children of the future a form of awareness that is really so deeply unusual. Something that 10 years ago, 20 years ago would be nothing more than science fiction. And it's not. It's part of our potential to be able to be cognitive in ways that are yet not understood by the mind. It's there within us. It's there within our form. It's part of what our future will be. All right, well, to all of you, thank you for participating in today's lecture. Nice that you're here. And to all of you that are downloading. And I hope you enjoyed that. Because it's very late in the evening for me, I will not be posting my version of these recordings in the resource area until tomorrow. But they'll be there tomorrow. And wherever you are, all of you, you take care. Until next time. Bye for now.